All right, final question for you today. We're actually going to go back to Gaylord Swim and a final quote from him, and I'll get your response. As he talked about the political process and how do we get to good policy. It's not, sometimes it's compared to making sausage. You don't really want to look at it because it can be painful to watch. But this is what Gaylord Swim said. He said, this process requires strong advocates, certainly, but it also takes a counterbalancing sense of humility, civility, and dialogue. The political course often leads to power struggles, pride, vanity, and egocentric ambition. It all too often manifests itself in strident voices, character assassinations, protest demonstrations, cloakroom deals, and corruption. So Gaylord was pretty prophetic in terms of that. But how do we deal with that?
You're giving me pause of what I'm getting into. That sounds horrible, but frankly, that's what it is. And you know, how do we fight against it? First, I'll tell you one way I've fought against it is the president and leader of a company. There's a real sense to say, well, what I say is the rules, and that doesn't work. I think of the comic strip Dilbert, where you've got the pointy hair boss who comes down from the executive suite to the employees in the cubicle where Dilbert's working, and he makes pronouncements that make no sense because he hasn't been touching the business. I learned really quickly that if I stayed in my president's suite at the office and thought grand thoughts, they were anything but grand. But if I was in our call center, in the warehouse, seeing how things were being received and picked, packed, and shipped, if I'm out on the road with our buyers, meeting with vendors, then I was getting their input, getting customer input, getting employee input, and my grand thoughts were influenced by those things. So I'm a consensus builder. I've also found that one of the characteristics of a great leader is somebody that aligns disparate interests behind a common goal. And that alignment is not always fingers and palms perfectly aligned, but sometimes it's the working part of the hands. And that can be good enough if we're moving together in a forward direction behind a common goal. I'm not running to be the king or the dictator of the state. I'm running to be the governor, someone who can bring disparate interests together, get them behind common goals of improving education, of moving forward on our lands, of making government more efficient and not increasing taxes. I know that that will be hard, and I know that it will require collaboration, but it's collaboration on tactics, not on principle.
Excellent. Jonathan Johnson, thanks so much for joining us here at Sutherland Institute. We appreciate your vision, your principles, and your policies. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Boyd.